Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Wednesday afternoon. Got a lot for you on the show today. We'll keep going over some Texas versus Washington in the Sugar Bowl and the Texas end of season and all of that. And, of course, there's been some news about who's going in the draft, who's not. We'll cover that as well. Talk a little bit more college football with you. Get into some NBA talk, some NFL talk as well, and some sound from E and Rob B. Hook them up this morning. We'll get to all of that on the show today and a whole lot more. And, of course, your text messages. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. Whatever you guys want to talk about, questions, comments, concerns, whatever's on your mind, talk about it on the text line with me, and I'll try and get to everybody's text. We always try to get in there. You guys drive the show. We just try to keep it on the rails. But it is your show on the text line. We love to have you aboard. So 512-447-3776 if you want to react. We didn't get a good in the text line too much yesterday. I was a bit tired having New Year's Eve roll in the national championship and then having a couple of busy days before that. Did not get a lot of sleep and then did the morning show yesterday. And so the afternoon show was kind of running on autopilot by the time the afternoon show came about. And then I slept for about 12 hours last night. So I'm back in the game. We're back now and feeling much better, ready to go. I mean, if we want to get into how the weekend went for football, my predictions weren't exactly right. I did have Alabama beating Michigan, which did not end up happening. Michigan looked like the better team there, and sadly, Washington looked like the better team against Texas. It ended up being that way. But it was a weird game. At the end of the day, we're a couple days later, and it's still, it was a game that was weird. I was talking to Rod about this when we were doing the morning show, that I was like, it's a weird, normally, at the end of the game, or, at the end of any game, especially though at the end of the season, you kind of walk away normally after the game and you're upset about the penalties. You're upset about, the problems that the team had, maybe play calling or whatever else. And we've gone through it, and we'll go through some more of it today. There's those issues. However, at the end of the day, I think the team put up a good fight. They ran into someone who is playing out of this world talent in Michael Penix right now and that team and in what Washington's doing right now. And, I think the reality of it is, I think the team, as much as people are getting on the secondary right now, and, I know they needs help. And I got a clip from Hook 'em Up this morning that will play another segment it'll kind of give you some more information and more talk about the future of the Longhorns and then them building to that, because they are trying to recruit and they got a great class trying to bring in more help in the edge rushing. You Trey Moore, the transfer as well, the pass rush that you weren't able to get to Penix. The offensive line did their job. They are, they did award-winning best offensive line in the country. They did their job. You saw that. The secondary, there were plays where they were on the defender and going back and watch some of those plays, if you had an elite defender, an elite defensive back, then yeah, maybe those guys do make the play. Maybe those guys can play the ball a little bit better and aren't watching the eyes. But they were clearly coached in this game to not let big plays happen, to stay on it, and basically make Michael Penix's job harder, make him have a tight window to get the ball into. And a lot of these passes were inches away from being knocked out and being defended passes. And it just ends up being that Michael Penix Jr. was dead on a lot of those plays. And you go up against that every once in a while, and that's going to happen. You could say that the bigger issue might have been that the offense wasn't able to score at the level they wanted to. I talked about it a lot yesterday. I'm not sure why Texas didn't run the ball more. I know there were fumbles from both running backs, so there may have been that trust issue that you didn't trust them to be able to hold the ball in this big of a game. Both of them, Jaden Blue and Cedric Baxter, only get 9 carries apiece. We didn't see Savion Red get in, which you may have seen him come in if you were worried about that. Maybe he was another guy, but I don't know if the trust was there, that any of those guys. Maybe they were worried about the pass rush of Washington, and they didn't necessarily want to have guys in that they didn't trust in being able to pick that blitz up on passing plays, or guys they didn't trust to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. I don't know what the reasoning is of why they didn't run the ball more. I personally would have liked to see them run the ball a few more times to try and get there. And I don't think any of us thought that they were going to beat Washington scoring 31 points. So the real bigger issue was that they just couldn't put up the points at the end of the day. And, Quinn Ewers, he still had over 300 yards passing. It's not like he had a terrible game. He had a bad first half, that's for sure. He never got in a rhythm in the first half. It seemed like his release points were a little bit off and a little low. But in the grand scheme of things, this Texas team really didn't do terribly in this game. In the grand scheme of things, Texas is where it needs to be as a team right now, building towards the future, having guys actually questioning the decision. Do they go pro or do they come back to fight for it? We saw, as much as the news that Xavier Worthy is going to be leaving is not necessarily the best news you're going to get. We all expected Xavier Worthy to go to the NFL after this year. As a guy's his size, I think there is a clock on the mileage that he can put on his body and how many hits he's going to be able to take in a career. And I mean, that's still plenty of years down the road, but you might want to be able to get into the NFL, play at a high level, get that second contract, get that big money that you want to have, and then still have a few years left on the end of that, try and get another contract, try and play out, get use your ability. So I think that it's not a bad thing for him to go now. When you see the success that Tank Dell had, but then of course there's the injury, but Tank Dell, Devontae Smith is another smaller guy that you're going to kind of use him as an example when you're talking about the base of Xavier Worthy, and we do have some good sound of that of Hook 'em Up play later too about Xavier Worthy's draft ability. But we also got the news that all reports are that Alfred Collins is expected to return to Texas next year, and I know he's not necessarily the one that everybody is going out and saying is the best. He's someone that has had untapped potential, I believe, is the best way to put what Alfred Collins is. He is he's definitely got a lot of potential, and playing time is going to be one of those factors that you're going to have to hope he gets better throughout next season, as he's going to play a lot more. And with the reports that Alfred Collins will be coming back, that he's going to get some more time. And yes, there are reports of Bo Davis that other people are suiting Bo Davis right now. He's very well paid to be at Texas. Nothing I've heard yet makes me believe that he is considering it, but I'm sure he will consider all options. But he's being taken care of very well of at Texas right now. So I'm not necessarily think you're losing Bo Davis. At worst, Texas probably has to give him a few more bucks to make him happy and get him to stay here. But you like to see what he does now that Alfred Collins will get a little bit more playing time. How is he able to help him get to that next level? And then in the reality of getting this team, getting the pass rush picked up, Trey Moore will be an automatic addition in that pass rush. You get another year of Colton Vasek coming up behind him. If he will be able to step up into that role, you'll see if some of the younger guys will be able to step up. Anthony Hill will have another year in this offense getting better, and what his potential could be with how well he played this first year, his freshman season. I think there's a lot of hope that you can walk out of that game. You can look at that game and say there does need to be improvements from Sark, but if we look at the difference from last year to this year of bowl performance and big game performance from Sark in the play calling, while there was some mistakes, while I don't agree with continuing to throw the ball at the level, and in the second half, the reality was he was throwing the ball better in the second half. So you didn't have to get away from it. These was more opening script that he kind of didn't want to throw, that he wanted to run the ball more. He was trying to set up this way, and I feel that he didn't necessarily make the switch off of the opening script enough. But that's something that, he's working on, because we know last season he had the opening script and then things went downhill very quickly after the opening script, right? That was last year, and our biggest complaint all year was that, man, the script is good, but then it's going downhill afterwards. And then it's reported, they were saying during the game, that his script could be up to 40 plays, which, again, they ran 36 plays in the first half and 4 were punts. So 40 seems well over the top. You have to make adjustments in that game, though. And it seemed that the script was too long this time, that they weren't able to make the adjustments, get into a run game, get into taking away and pushing the ball through the middle more, where Washington was letting them have what they wanted to have. Washington was all about being on the outside, stopping the passes on the outside. And even JT Sanders was doing okay over the middle. He didn't look like he was 100% there the entire game. I think that he was getting beat up again, and maybe some of those nagging injuries hadn't been fully healed. It feels bad that Keelan Robinson injured himself in the lead up to the game, so he wasn't able to be the factor that he'd love to be in that game after last year with the Alamo Bowl and the performance that he wasn't as great there. This time they put him back I guess as just Sark being a loyal guy and Sark being the guy who wants to, in recruiting, I believe keeps his promises as well as any other coach, because we've seen him do questionable things for the guys that have stuck with him and have been there with him. But I don't know if that's always the best thing for Texas. We will see as it continues on. And, if we look at it that way, I'm not as mad about this Texas loss as I normally would be. I think that they lost this game. There was a few key points where you could say this was, if you could change those points, the 4th and 1, where Tavondre is not on the field and Byron Murphy is not on the field, and they go to fake it on a 4th and 1 and try and draw you off sides in the first half. They don't. It doesn't work. They come back to the sideline, realize that the big men aren't in the middle, and say, well, go back out there. And if they're not out there, then just run the ball up the middle. Because Dylan Johnson, when those guys are on the field, he's not doing anything. He's 2.9 yards per carry was the end of the game, which is not great. You'd like to be over that if you're a really good running back. But the problem was when he needed the yardage, he was getting it. They were able to find him in the holes. They were able to, because with the linebackers push more back in the secondary, really trying to make sure they weren't killed by the pass, which they still were because Michael Penix was going to light him up. I just think that the game plan, Washington had a better game plan going in, and Texas was not able to adjust quickly enough. And unfortunately for Texas, that's the cards you get dealt. That maybe a Michigan team. Now, the pass rush for Michigan, I don't know if that would have worked out much better for Texas, because we saw what they were able to do to Milroe and Alabama. We saw what Michigan was able to do taking it after Alabama. And look, Alabama was still in there because of miscues by Michigan. Washington didn't really have that many miscues. They had the muff punt, which if you take the muff punt out, Texas isn't in the game. But again, that goes back to if you take the 2 fumbles out, Texas maybe wins it. So you can't take any of that out. But Michigan also had their stumbles and the missed extra point that made it so it was still a game at the end of the game, if that makes sense. It was a good feeling for Texas to be a part of a Final Four that you felt you should have been in. That we saw last year that TCU didn't feel like it should have been in there. And for Texas to feel like it really should have been in a Final Four, that's a good feeling to have as well for this Texas team. And I think there's a lot to look at in this Texas team and in that game. And the positives that Quinn Ewers did have a bad first half and responded in the second half with a much better second half. That's a Quinn Ewers we hadn't seen. And I know there's a lot of talk that I've seen still going today because people are waiting to see the answers of who's going pro and who's not, and we'll get those over the rest of the week, and I'm sure we'll still continue to get them, and we may get one during the show. Who knows? Of who is declaring for the draft and who's not. But for Texas for Quinn Ewers, you would love to have him come back because you can see what a guy like Michael Penix could do with the extra experience. And for a guy like Quinn Ewers, when you see his progression, his actual progression through the years, and what he was last year to what he is this year, and how much better he is in those big moments, and how much closer he is, and the resiliency now to be able to come back. And I know he missed the pass at the end of the game, and I know he missed some plays. I think that Xavier Worthy was hurt. I don't know that for a fact, but I also know he got 2 targets in a game. And as much as you want to say that they were game planning that if he wasn't going to get it, even that, if you go in the second half, you're going to try and find him. There are reports that he was running 50-yard dashes before the game, but that doesn't mean anything if he can't cut. And maybe he was just going to be trying to make straight routes, and if those were double covered or safety cheated over, it didn't matter. But he did not seem to be the factor in the game that he would have liked to have been. You would have liked to seen J.T. Sanders, who led the team in targets, be able to break one of those big ones and be able to get some extra yards. You would have liked to seen chunk plays, which is not Washington doesn't really allow. You would have liked to seen some more of those things that Texas made their name on that Washington kind of made their name stopping. It didn't happen. But, we'll get into this a little bit earlier because I do want to make this a tech show because I didn't really get to respond to text yesterday. So I hope you're listening now and enjoying. You want to join us on the text line and talk about this game. We'll try and start a conversation on the text line. But I want to give you the big fat poll today too early so you guys can jump in on that. Then we'll talk a little bit more college football, and we'll go and take a break, and we'll come back. We'll keep talking, all right? So let's hit the big fat poll early today.
Patrick's big fat poll of the day on the Horn.
All right, big fat poll of the day today. Text line's open, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776. If you want to join the conversation, we're going to be talking everything from NFL to, of course, the college football playoff and the Longhorns, and we'll get into everything. A little NBA even too today. We'll get into all that, but if you want to get into the big fat poll of the day, this is what I want to ask you guys. And I know this is only the Wednesday. This is the Wednesday after. We couldn't ask this before, but the season's over. We all feel pretty good about what Sark has done getting this team in 3 years from, a Tom Herman era where it was okay. You had the Sugar Bowl win, but things weren't quite progressing, and maybe the faith was leading off of that team, and maybe you were getting some different reports that players weren't as happy as they wanted to be. The donorships weren't, the big money donors weren't necessarily happy. And we go, then get Sark. It's 5-7. There's a lot of questions. The next season, not a great year 2, but much better, but not great. He was just close on a lot of games, but couldn't get it done. A lot of questioning about his play calling and his coaching. Now you get to a college football playoff. It's a 12-team playoff next year. So a lot more opportunity to get in. You're going to the SEC, though. A lot more to happen in the SEC, and you're going to be playing better teams. And the margin of error is going to be less. So the poll for the day today, in your mind, is Texas back? It's the 3 words you can't say as Texas fans because you get mocked for saying if you say Texas is back, you get mocked for it. I don't know. I don't know if we can say that. I think you have to have a period of time for it to happen. But in your opinion, are they? And I want to know, what does that mean to you? In your head, what is required for them to be back? Are they back now? And how did they get there? Or is there still more time where they need to give back? Because we have to look, and what are you comparing us to? Because what is your back to? Is your back to a 10-win season, and they're consistently competing for a conference championship, which is now going to be different because you're going into a conference with Georgia and Alabama? I mean, you're going in with 2, dynasties of schools. Do you need to be on their level to be back? Do you have to be able to compete with Georgia and Alabama? And it doesn't matter if you're right below that. If you're number 3 in the SEC, are you back? Let me know. Let me know what you think on that. And do you have to be in the college ball playoff every year, even though Texas was never that team. Now, Texas between 2000 and 2009 was a really good team. And there were some really good years, and they were one away. But what does it mean for you? Is Texas back, and are they back? I'd like to know that. Because if we look at the other teams in this Final Four, now we can mention Georgia is going to be, they're out of it, but they're still going to be really good next year. We know they're still going to be really good. They went out there and boat raced Florida State. Sorry, they boat raced Florida State. Florida State will be good again. They get DJ Uiagalelei to come in as their new quarterback. They'll be good again. And the ACC will probably be bad again. So they'll be able to go and get that. By the way, if you want to know the conference bowls, how they shaped out, and yes, there's still one game left. But if you want to know how the conference bowl shaked out, the ACC ended up 5-6, the Big Ten 5-4, the Big 12 5-4, the Pac-12 5-3, and the SEC 5-4, which basically means everybody won 5 games. It wasn't really that much of a deciding factor which conference was the best. If you want to look into individual matchups and who looked better and who lost these big games, I think the Big 12 did fare pretty well. The SEC, you see that part where some of those teams probably should have won games that they didn't. And some of the teams in the SEC were able to handle their business. And the ACC they have a lot of teams. So they were able to win. The win percentage-wise, of course, goes to the Pac-12. They only had 8 teams get in. They win 5-3. They win the percentage win, and part of that is Washington beating Texas. However, you can't also add into that they will not exist next year. So there's partly that as well. But I want to know on the text line. So if we say those are this parameters, Texas is going to the SEC. So we have to factor that into the back because you don't want to say they're back and walk into the SEC and get smacked in the mouth because the conference is just that much better. I don't think they're that much better. Personally, I don't believe that the SEC is that much better that Texas is going to have a huge step back. I think they will have to adapt to it. I think that the personnel they have has to adapt. I think the coaching is definitely going to have to adapt. You may see some time next season. There may be some growing pains, but I don't know if it'll be bad enough that Texas can't have a 10-win season again. And I think if you have a 10-win season, then you're getting pretty close to that 12-team that 12-team college football playoff. Then you're getting closer to that. If Quinn Ewers decides to come back, it's of course different than if Arch comes in because there's a lot of growing pains if Arch is there. Now, he may be great. We don't know, but there's going to be growing pains as there is for any new starting quarterback. So that's the question for today. Is Texas back, and what does that mean to you? If they're not, what do they have to do to be back? Win a national championship? Win 2, win 3? That's not back. That's new. I mean, you can say that if you want to, but that's not back. No, I don't think back is winning national. I think back is consistently playing at a high level. So I don't know if they're back. I think if you look at it, I think they're as close to being back as they've been in a long time because this team feels like a team that is going to be able to keep going. But I don't know if they're back because it's hard to say it after one season, right? Just hard to say after one season. But it feels like it, doesn't it? Feels like it. All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into some of your texts. I want to play some sound from E and Rod B, and we may get into some NFL or NBA talk as well. There was a trade between the time when I talked to you last. Spurs in action last night. Rockets in action tonight. Mavs in action tonight as well. We may try to get to some of that. And, of course, your text messages here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a Wednesday afternoon. Musical theme today is just, or this week, is just playing the blues. We played some yesterday. Just felt like a blues week with the weather, with the season, football season for Longhorns being over and college football almost wrapping up. It feels like just felt like a blues week to me. So we're just going to be playing some blues all week and different styles of blues, but we'll be playing blues for the rest of the week. We got another show tomorrow with the blues, and then we'll get into 512 Friday on Friday and breaking down some NFL playoffs that are going to be huge. We'll get into some NFL as well in the 5 o'clock hour. But, of course, your text messages, 512-447-3776, asking you, is Texas back, and what does that mean to you? What does being back mean? Do you feel they are? What do they have to do if they're not? Let me know. What does Texas being back mean to you? And anything else you want to talk about the game? If you had opinion about the game you want to put out there, if you've got something you want to, a take that you haven't heard or a take that you think was underrepresented or anything about the Texas game where you feel where it's Wednesday and, it's 2 days later and you still have that on your chest, you feel free to put them in. You guys drive the show. We just try to keep it on the rails. I'm going to play you a clip from Hook 'em Up. That is, when you talk about Texas being back, when you talk about the future of this program, Rod kind of went in and Aaron went into a little bit of what Texas lacked in the Washington game and the positive side of when you look at recruiting and how this team is being built, that Texas may be 1 year ahead of schedule in some aspects. And as they continue to round that out, maybe getting even better. It's Hook 'em Up for me and Robbie. It's weekday morning, 6 to 11 right here on the Horn. And they're playing a little highlight from me here on the Sports Complex.
It's a good problem to have to deal with, that your team is playing for a college football championship, and hey, you got a chance within your region to be able to make the trip to go support the team. That's awesome. Like I said, usually around bowl season, we're accustomed to Texas playing in a lackluster bowl that nobody really cares about, and not a lot of Longhorn fans are traveling for it, even if it's 2 hours down the road or something, because it's a bowl, it's the Alamo Bowl, or it's the Texas Bowl again. And
no bowl.
Or no bowl. Not the case for this team, man. This team was a great team. There was some disappointment, obviously, in the way they performed in that game, but these are good problems to have. If Texas got this issue where they can't get over the hump quite to get to a national title game, but they're right there banging on the door for the next couple of years, that's a good thing. I mean, because Texas is ahead of schedule. They weren't supposed to be here this year. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't deserve it. They deserve it. That's pretty obvious. But in terms of our projections for this team, most of us projected, hey, Big 12 title. That's the goal. You got to win the Big 12 this year. That's the track you're on. That's the pace you're on. They exceeded that. They went past
that schedule, and I think it showed up in the game. I think when you take that step from Big 12 to elite top four, look, Washington. We said this for a month, and that's why. Again, you were on point with everything you said about this team and what they had to deal with. But look, a better quarterback at Washington. Mm-hmm. They had a better quarterback than you. That showed up. They had a better coach. Mm-hmm. Steve Sarkisian still has to prove, but I mean, Kalen DeBoer and Sark, there's not a lot of separation, but DeBoer is the national coach of the year, and we felt like his team with the experience he had, and they had a better game plan here. But it helps when you have the better quarterback and then 3 great receivers, and you're dealing with the number 1 passing offense in the country. The Joe Moore award-winning offensive line that don't give up sacks. So for everybody, clamoring about why couldn't we hit the quarterback, no one really hits Michael Penix in his career.
You're no different.
It's just kind of the deal. And you got to figure out a way. And the way is you have to out-scheme them, and then you have to outscore them. You just do. Go back to the game. They in 21 consecutive wins now. The game that they should have lost was the Oregon game at home, just in Seattle, where Dan Mullen kept going for field goals.
They lost that Arizona State game.
They almost, yeah. Well,
they didn't even score an offensive touchdown?
You're right about that. They had a pick six.
That's true.
Well, that's the last point, at least that I'm going through. But so you have to outscore them usually when they're going. When Penix is in a rhythm, you got to outscore them. And Texas stopped scoring in the third quarter, and they gave up 13 unanswered points, and that really lost them the game. But the other point is, Rod, you have to anticipate that we're going to have to score a lot of points here to beat this team. The Oregon game that they won at home, that was when Dan Mullen kept going for it on 4th down and not taking the field goals.
They were 0-3 on 4th down.
Yes, right. And that's 9 points, and they would have won the game.
Yeah.
So you have to keep scoring. Texas did not. And so this kind of played out as advertised if you were doing the deep dive work that you were doing and we were talking about on this show. And here's the last point. They are more clutch than you.
Yes, they are.
That's another thing you have to overcome. And I'll give you the stat. Washington is now the first team to play in 10 straight games decided by 10 or fewer points, and win all of them in the Division I era of college football. That's how clutch they are. That's pretty awesome.
Yep.
And so you have to beat all that, and Texas couldn't, and they damn near did. So that's to your point about dealing with the frustration that you're feeling today and yesterday and Monday night is much better than the apathy of previous years. You're getting there. Mm-hmm. And Michigan's lost in the national semifinal round each of the last 2 years, and now they're playing for the Natty. That's kind of the path you'd like to. Georgia had to go through some tough national semifinals before they won one, and then they won two. That's kind of the typical growth of this thing. It's not very few LSUs that come out of nowhere,
win it all,
and then fall apart.
Yeah,
and then fall apart.
Yeah, like that's like Auburn did with Cam Newton.
Yes,
and it's usually because one player comes in there and kind of transforms the program.
Yeah,
but no, that's a great point. I agree with you 100%. And the thing about this Texas team being ahead of schedule, you can tell because they lost this game essentially based on the lack of roster construction in certain positions that they just haven't addressed really yet. They haven't had time. They built the offense with big humans on the O-line. Sark got his quarterback and brought in X-Men guy's receiver. JT Sanders at tight end. They built that offense quickly because Sark's an offensive guy. He's like, I'm getting my guys.
I need my big humans. I need my speed.
And then he told PK, you got to wait, man, like a year or so. Let me get my offense together. We got to devote resources to that. That's talent acquisition priority number one right now. And then we'll get to the defense. And they started getting to the defense, right? You got your Anthony Hills, and you got your young Malik Muhammad, and you got your Terrence Brooks back there now. Derek Williams, a young buck now. So they're getting some young guys. I think they thought they had more talent on defense to develop, and they're right, in addition to Sark being an offensive guy. So they emphasized talent acquisition on offense first, and they just started building the defense in the last, couple of talent acquisition cycles.
18 months, yeah.
Yeah, so you got your Anthony Hill, you got your Malik Muhammad, you got your Derek Williams, and they're going to get Colin Simmons in. And there's a reason, guys, that you got 5 DBs in this recruiting class. There's a reason.
2 5-stars.
Right? There's a reason you're bringing in 6
and
total.
Several high-end 4-stars.
Yeah, with Makuba, you're bringing in, 6 DBs in terms of talent acquisition, season here. And I think that that is deliberate. That's intentional. That's Texas looking at their weaknesses and looking at the last phase of roster construction for Sark here and building this thing. And they thought, I don't know why, they thought they could wait on DB to overhaul and construct that position last, because it seems like that's what they're doing. Remember that linebacker class? Was that 2 years ago?
It was the 2020.
They ran like 4 linebackers.
If you
Yeah, they've been building.
You consider Colin Simmons a linebacker?
Yes, and I bet they'll go back to the D line actually after this class.
Well, and think about this:
losing so many D.
To your point about PK, I mean, PK was somewhat mocked when he was hired by or questioned by a lot of Longhorn fans because at Washington he specialized in that 2-4-5 defense, right?
Yes.
Where they do 2 down linemen. And then it's kind of 4 linebackers, but they're hybrid.
They get the 2 overhangs on the edges are hybrids.
Yeah, that they can set the edge, but they can also rush.
Yeah.
And then the 5 defensive backs.
That's what you got Ethan Burke doing kind of now.
Right.
Ethan Burke dropping the coverage sometimes.
And I think if you're looking at their talent acquisition, that's where they're going, right? PK is going to build the defense in his image like Sark's building the offense. And so you don't need as many big defensive tackles. You need a few. You need some big dudes, but you want speed. And that leads to the 4-5 linebackers of the last class with Darian Gillette and Samaje Burrell and Leona Lafau, Colin Simmons. They call them linebackers, or they're edge or linebacker. And now you follow that up with 6 DBs.
Yeah.
And you also last year recruited a kid out of New Jersey named Sadir Mitchell, who's a big body, big space hauler up front. Look, go back to when Sark was at Washington. He wanted those big Haloti Ngata type guys, who would just hold the point and then speed everywhere, where you could be, and Sark said he hired PK because it was so tough to go against his defenses.
Yep.
Because they could confuse you in so many ways. And, so now he's letting PK build the defense that used to give Sark trouble when he was at Washington.
Yeah.
When PK was at Boise. And Sark was playing when he was at Washington.
No, it was still the same defense. PK's been running basically that same style of defense since he's been a defensive coordinator. And you're right. And they're building it last. And even Sark talked about the DBs in his class, what they all have in common. They're all coverage guys. So they're recruiting coverage, something
coverage and pass rush.
And I always said you gotta recruit what you can't coach, and you can't coach pass rushing ability. You can't coach coverage ability. And he also mentioned the DBs. This is something that went under the radar, that basically all of them are hybrids.
Yeah.
They don't even want to be, but he said he called Kobe Black. Kobe Black went on Twitter and said, I'm a cornerback. And Sark said in the introductory press conference, he's a 3-position player. He can play cornerback, he can play safety, and he can play nickel.
Yeah, they want to be versatile.
He said that about at least 4 of the defensive backs, that they have versatility and that these guys can move around. They can play multiple positions, have multiplicity in their skill set. That is not by, trust me, that's not coincidence. That is by design. And as goes what you said about PK's defense, they want those big bodies to win the numbers game in the interior. But most of those other positions are going to be hybrid kind of players. Guys who are not at a matchup disadvantage when teams start spreading them out and looking for hunting those matchups.
Well, think about the 3 keys there, Rod. That's coverage, pass rush, and speed.
Yep.
With the size and the girth in the middle, right, to hold the point of attack. You're not going to have Tavondre Sweat, and you're not going to have Byron Murphy moving forward. They're probably off to the National Football League, or Alfred Collins, but you're coming with Sadir Mitchell, and you're coming with Vernon Broughton, and you're coming with Trill Carter, and you're going to keep adding to that. And they brought in several others in their D-line class, and then those hybrid players, as you said, around that what is Ethan Burke, right? You saw him dropping into coverage.
Yep.
In the game against Washington the other night. Colton Vasek. There's another guy coming. Colin Simmons, Darian Gillette, Samaje Burrell, all these guys. And then now you got to have coverage in the back end.
Yep.
And you got a versatile, cross-trained coverage. Dwayne Akina somewhere is doing a rain dance because he's loving the cross-train.
Exactly. Everything's full circle, right? It's just it seems like this is kind of full circle. When I played and they were looking for 5 tool DBs, essentially it's kind of the same thing, but you want guys that can cover. And I think that's going back to the Texas-Washington matchup. They're ahead of schedule. They haven't fully addressed the secondary yet, and it came back to bite them. It's not. I don't think it's anybody's fault. Like I said, they're ahead of schedule, and they're still building this defense. And what didn't they have enough of? Pass rushing, pressure on Penix, and didn't have enough coverage defenders that were holding up against the deep ball and against those vertical shots downfield. They're going to get there. That's the last piece of the roster construction. And if I'm Sark, I feel good because, we lost this game because, we just didn't have enough time to rebuild every phase and every facet of the defense.
And to your credit, Rod, you said the day that the matchup was announced, and I thought, well, maybe this is the best matchup. You said, no, it's not.
Yeah, it was bad.
This is a bad matchup for Texas, and we saw why. Now, the matchup with Alabama or Michigan would have probably been better.
It would have been way better.
Yeah, because we stopped the run. We're physical at the point of attack. We can handle Jalen Milroe or J.J. McCarthy. And we can cover your guys. We can't cover these guys.
Can't cover 3 NFL wide
And we'll see if Michigan can.
Michigan might have some trouble with them, too.
I think a
little bit. Just if Penix is if he's on like he was versus Texas, they'll have issues. But Michigan's defense is better than Texas' defense. Because the secondary is better.
Yeah, and Connor Stallions was seen at the Rose Bowl, just so you know. Cited.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rod B. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. So you hear all that, what I talked about earlier about the future of Texas, and the future looks bright right now. We're all feeling pretty good after I know it's a loss. It's the best I felt after a loss in a long time in Texas. So we're asking the question, just because it is kind of a stigma in Texas now, is Texas back, and what does that mean to you? What do they have to do to get back? If they're not back, if they are back, how did they get there? Let us know on the text line, 512-447-3776. Anything else you want to talk about the game? Anything else you want to talk about in sports? Hit us up. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into your text messages, and we'll keep the show rolling here. At the 5 o'clock hour, we'll get into some NBA. We'll get into some NFL talk as well. We haven't had time to talk about the Cowboys and the controversy if the Cowboys win over the Lions and the Texans in the AFC South and how that is coming together, and no one was expecting the Texans and the Colts game to be the flex game on a Monday Night Football on a Saturday night on a last week of the season. All that. We'll get into all of that and, of course, more and more of your text messages. 512-447-3776 right here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back in the sports complex here on the Horn, playing some blues because it just feels like a blues week, doesn't it? I don't know. It feels like a blues week to me. I've been listening to some, so I put some songs aside to play for you guys. Play some blues here on the show. We'll play it today and play it tomorrow. And then, Friday's 512 Friday and promoting local music. We like to do that as well here on the show. But the text line's open. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. We're asking you today, is Texas back? I mean, it's a stigma in Texas now. We all know people like to joke about it and use it against us, but I'm reclaiming it. Is Texas back? And what does that mean to you? And if they're not, what do they have to be? And if they are, what do they mean? On the text line, we'll go. Bevo Angel says, proud of the Horns staying in the game and fighting the very last snap. Tough to see that too many penalties and 2 costly turnovers were the difference in the game. Congratulations to Washington, who was a better team, and I'm really excited for next season. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a number of factors in it, but like I will tell you, the number one factor in why Washington beat Texas was that Michael Penix Jr. played a extremely good game of football. It was really, really good. And if you go back and you want to put yourself through to watch it again, and you can watch it, just take out the fandom of it and anything else and just watch where he was putting balls in windows that were super small, where he was evading pressure, where guys were getting back on him against a Joe Moore winning offensive line. They were able to get back, but they weren't able to get to him, and he was able to slide out, and he ran a few times, which Michael Penix Jr. is not a runner anymore. He was in Indiana. It was a track guy coming up, ran it in Indiana, but once he went to Washington, he'd already hurt himself so many times that he was basically not going to be doing that anymore. But I think that in reality, the fact that Texas was still in it shows a lot of heart. They got lucky because without the injury to Dylan Johnson and running that ball, which is a not a great decision by Kalen DeBoer, they don't get the ball back. They bump into him, put him 30 yards or put him 15 yards further up. But remember, there's 2 fumbles, but Washington also went for it on a 4th down and didn't get it. That's technically a turnover. They were in scoring range for Texas, didn't get it. That's 7 points not on the board for Texas or for Washington. They also muffed a punt that Texas got. That's 7 points not on the board for Washington. So we can say both teams kind of had those 2 turnovers. The stop on 4th down early in the game would have been huge. There's a lot of plays that would have been huge, but a lot of it was even the penalties were a problem as well for Texas, the drive-killing penalties, pushing you back. But in the reality, Michael Penix Jr. has played a really good game. I mean, that's if you want to get mad at rules at anything, get mad at 7th year and 8th year and 9th year players. I know he's a 6th-year player, but those guys who stick around in college and keep getting better and just get to that level, he was playing at a higher level than most people in college football will play. Next says, back is a natty. Trying to get back to Vince and Colt days where they were competing and winning natties. Just like in baseball, young NBA teams don't typically win rings because they lack experience. Horns need to use it for motivation for next year. They have experience in being the playoff team now. I agree they have experience. I can't say back is winning natties like Colt and Vince because Colt didn't win one. We know he competed for one, and we know he would have won. We would have won. I had this conversation with a young Alabama fan I was talking to the other day, and he was like, yeah, in the 2009, I was like, look, man, some of us were around that team then. They would have won. It wasn't close. They would have won that game. But no, I agree. I think that back is competing and constantly in the conversation late in the season. So yes, this is the first year of it. So I'm with you, but I think if you're getting back and you're competing and you're in the 12-team playoff next year, and then you can keep continuing to be in there in the SEC, that's where you want to be. Papa, also everybody forgetting we won the Big 12 championship. That was great. Yes, because that was for most of us, winning the Big 12 championship that's a successful season for Texas. You win the Big 12 championship. You don't do it in a screwy way where it's a bunch of teams are 8-win teams, and you somehow get in on a technicality and a tiebreaker, and you get in. You went out there. You were the best team in the Big 12. You showed it. You slipped up against Oklahoma. I think that would make the season, that much better. But you show it. You get in there. You give it the Big 12 championship. And lack of holding calls on Washington of why Texas is in there. Like that offensive line was really good. The holds on Texas in the game, as much as I didn't like them, they were really obvious. They were right in front of officials, and they did affect the plays. So I'm sure there were some where I'm sure Washington held plenty. And I'm sure Texas held plenty more in that game as well. Like they both held plenty of times in that game. The holding calls for Texas, as much as I didn't want to, I would yell at the TV and they'd show the replay, and then I have to go, all right. So I don't know if it was necessarily a poorly officiated game. I think Texas was just a little bit more undisciplined in those moments. But I appreciate texting in. Oklahoma Greg says they need to be at least 10-plus win seasons in the SEC, or it'll be considered a fluke season. My Oklahoma State friends think they won't win 7 to 8 games. They went to Oklahoma State. I won't trust them. In the SEC, OU friends don't say much other than they beat us this year. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma, I'm not going to – I get that everyone's going to say that it was a fluke year for Texas. If you look at the trajectory and the player development, it isn't. Now, the question is, is Quinn Ewers going to stay? We haven't heard that yet. If he is, then it makes it much more believable. We don't know about Jonathan Brooks. If you add Jonathan Brooks back into a lineup with Jaden Blue and with C.J. Baxter, that's a running back core that is deadly. We know Xavier Worthy's gone. How is this young wide receiver core going to be able to step up in the next year? You did have Matthew Golden in the transfer portal. Is there another wide receiver that earns a transfer portal, or you're able to get another one? Or is this what you're going to go in with? Tight end position is going to be interesting. Can you have the amount of weapons? Sark, really, this offense works in Sark's offense, which we know that last year the problem was that Isaiah Neyor was supposed to be that guy. He gets hurt, and they never really were able to equal it out. How much does Jordan Whittington mean to this team? There's questions to be answered, but I don't think that 7-8 wins in the SEC sounds more like the sour grapes. And Oakland Greg says, this was our destiny year, beating all the teams we lost to last year, including getting another shot at Washington, getting the break of the Alabama, beating Georgia, FSU losing their QB and playing bad in the championships, final in Texas' backyard, Houston. I'm afraid it'll be extremely hard to have all those cards lined up again anytime soon. As bad as Texas played in that game and Penix playing elite, we really should have won it. And Texas didn't play terribly. Penix was just elite. And you can be a downsayer and say that this was the year everything lined up. Look, FSU, things lined up for them. They were not that good of a team. Jordan Travis was an elite player, and they basically ended up with two not good teams to be. They were down to South Alabama in that game, and if he doesn't get hurt, they probably don't blow them out. But they're just not. They weren't that great of a team. They just weren't. They were going to get boat raced in the finals with Jordan Travis. In real reality, they were not that good of a team. And if they played Georgia, they would have got killed too. And Georgia, could have done well in the playoffs as well. They're just a really good team. I don't buy into that this was a lucky year that we caught all of the breaks. I think that they need to improve again next year. I played the clip that the secondary and the defensive line are going to improve again, or the edges will at least improve. It's hard to say improve if Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat are gone. It's hard to say that's going to improve inside. But I think the defense will overall continue to grow. I think Quinn Ewers in another year could be really good for this team. And I know the SEC is good, but again, you're talking about, can you go in there and compete with the top teams? You're going to be playing a Michigan team. We'll see if Harbaugh's still there. We'll see how many players are still on that Michigan team after the season. But you could go in there and have a big win in the Big House next year. That's a possibility, and this season starts off just fine. It starts off like last year. I don't think it's necessarily a complete fluke thing, and it's a 12-team playoff next year as well. That's the other factor of all this stuff. They would have made it, easily, even if SFU was in next year, because it is a team. It is a 12-team playoff next year. So I'm not bought into this was our destiny year. I think this was a year where they're continuing to grow. And as far as the revenge tour, that revenge tour was last year. That was what technically was revenge tour, and they had to stop saying it because they kept losing. They couldn't say it, but that was supposed to be last year. So I don't think that changes. I think this next year you just have a new slogan. This is the no one believes in us. We're the underdog year, whatever it is. And you go in there and you start beating up on SEC teams. You're going to have to change up what the defense does, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as people think it is. Texas will be back, but only when they overhaul their defense, defensive secondary, and that includes coaches. All right. I get they didn't do great, but that's because of recruiting. That's because they had to start building. They will get better with time. I would not say we necessarily need to get rid of Gideon and Terry Joseph. If Sark does, then that's fine. I'm not saying that he has to keep them. I'm not saying he has to get rid of them. But I don't think the secondary necessarily played as bad as people thought they did in that game. They didn't play well, but this is a Washington team that lit up everybody. They just lit up everybody. And some of those passes plays, they were coached to play facing the wide receiver to try and make it as hard as they could make it. And they did their job. And, there were plays where it should have been in there. They got tackles. They didn't allow touchdowns on big plays. Yes, they allowed big plays. They didn't allow touchdowns on big plays. They made them keep going down and earning it. And that's kind of what this defense was built on. That's what PK built this defense on, was let them get down but try and make them get field goals. They just weren't able to hold at the end. That was more the issue, was Dylan Johnson getting 2 touchdowns in there, some penalties, some things you don't want to see down in the stretch. But they did hold actually pretty decently, and I know the secondary, but we knew the secondary was weak, and I think they're going to be much better. Recruiting-wise, they've done a great job of recruiting. I think that will continue to grow. But I will not say we need to fire everybody, but I'm also not a we need to fire everybody most of the time guy. I will tell you when I want somebody fired. I do have those. I'm not above anything, but I normally think it's blatantly obvious when you can see people not performing and not developing, which I think are secondary developed. If they're not putting effort out, if the culture is wrong, if the people are underperforming because of effort, then you want to then I'm worried about the coaches. If something just looks naturally off, they just look like a secondary that wasn't as good as the offense. It's not an NFL secondary, and that was an NFL quarterback throwing to 3 NFL wide receivers. That's what it looked like. That's what it looked like. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll get back to the text line. We'll get to some NFL talk as well. Keep on texting in 512-447-3776. Poll of the day, is Texas back? And if not, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? On the text line, 512-447-3776. We'll be right back here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, hornfm.com. Hour 2 on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. Gonna get into some NFL, some NBA. We got time. Another clip from E and Rob B talking about Xavier Worthy and where he may rank in NFL draft standings and where he may end up and all of that. Some good stuff from them earlier this morning. And, of course, more of your text messages, 512-447-3776. Just asking you. Just asking. If you have any things else you want to talk about the Texas, the playoff game, go ahead and text that in. If you want to talk about the big fat poll today is Texas back. And what does that mean to you? What do they got to do it? It's only one season, so you may say, well, I need to see more than one season. I need to see continued success. You may say it's more than they've done, or maybe you can say, no, we can look and see what's happening in the top recruiting classes, the player development, everything looks bright and sunny. Here we are. Just let me know on the text line, 512-447-3776. Let's talk a little Cowboys, all right? And then I'm going to get back to the text line. But let's talk a little Cowboys first because I do want to bring up the game that, we're not getting too much. We'll get tomorrow. We'll start talking about the Cowboys going on and playing their last game of the season. But there may be some issues as they go into the playoffs and all of that. But let's just go back in the Lions Cowboys because I haven't talked to you. I know it's Wednesday, but we haven't talked since the game happened about this. In the Cowboys winning 2019, there is a lot of controversy after this game. And first off, just to put everything aside, for Lions fans, it is now Wednesday. Move on. Move on. Nothing's going to change. Complaining about this by still to Wednesday is not the winning mindset. It's not. And I know the Lions have started to move on, and it's more of the fans and it's people getting mad. The NFL's not rigged. No one's set out to get against you. You were trying to run a play that, you were trying to do some things that wasn't, you were trying to be clever and tricky, and you tricked the wrong person. And that was it. You sent 3 guys over to the refs to get one to claim to be eligible, to check in as eligible. You've been checking a different guy ineligible all game, so that you were trying to throw them off by having 3 guys go up to the ref. You were trying to throw them off by getting another guy constantly eligible and not throwing to him, just to throw everybody off. And look, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. But if your entire win and loss and this is the season and the Lions, chances are over because a trick play didn't work, that's the problem. The fact that you go, man, we got screwed out of that game. I mean, Goff threw 2 interceptions in it, but we got screwed. It's just a weird, I get it. When I used to play sports and that was the deal, and I was raised in a way that when you lost, you could be mad about it. You could be mad about the refs for about an hour or 2 hours, and then you looked at what you did. And you said, okay, well, we should have won the game. We should have had a shot in that game. If we didn't throw the interceptions, if we didn't do this, we didn't do that. We cost ourselves the fact that we were down going into the game. We missed an extra point. That is the reason we lost the game. So the Cowboys get the win. I'm not buying into the. I know people hate. People want to make everything rigged, and when it's not, it's not. But in that game, you also saw. The Cowboys do 2 things very well. Get the ball to CeeDee Lamb, 13 catches for 227 yards, which you love to see. Dak Prescott had a good game, not a great game. But 20 points for this Cowboys offense is not where you want to see them be. You'd like to see them be a little bit more productive of getting into the end zone. You like to see them finishing drives. And it goes back to the problem that the Cowboys are continuing to have, because 19 points isn't bad against the Lions. But 20 points is not great. You need to start putting up more points than that. Is that the run game is just not happening. Tony Pollard, 16 carries for 49 yards. He's was said today that he hasn't done what he wanted to do, that he hasn't been the guy that he wants to be and the player that he wants to be this season. He has to keep working. He says there's no lingering injuries. But we saw Rico Dotto was out in that game, so Deuce Vaughn came in. He had 2 carries, a yard apiece on the carry, so he is not there. He's now been checked in. He's now on the injured reserve, so Deuce Vaughn is done for the season. It does open up a position because we've said all year that they've been kind of in a bad place, the Cowboys have, because they have 3 running backs on their roster and 3 quarterbacks, and they couldn't let go of Deuce Vaughn because someone would probably pick him up. He's a young guy. He's a rookie. He has shown flashes that you could use him in the correct package. So some team could go pick him up on his rookie contract and say, well, we just add another rookie. We're high on the waiver wire. Why not add another rookie, right? So that you couldn't just cut him. So you had to keep him on the roster, so you couldn't put him on the practice squad. Then you go over to Trey Lance, which you can't cut him because someone will definitely pick him up and put him on and give him a try if you let him go. You got to trade for him. So those are two guys that are not ever going to play for you, but that you have to keep on your active roster. But now that Deuce Vaughn is out, it does open up that Dalvin Cook got cut. Now he's not looked good. He did not look good for the Jets at all. We know he didn't look good for the Jets. We know that, a lot of people are saying he might be done, and Rico Dowdle technically has better grades at some point than Dalvin Cook does. He wasn't able to get going. I'm just saying, if I'm the Cowboys and if I'm Jerry Jones, I am trying anything to find another running back. And trying anything to get a couple more yards per carry out of my running back position, to be able to carry the ball a few more times. We know Mike McCarthy we're going to run the ball more this season. That was a problem. And then Jerry Jones gets pissed off because everyone telling him to cut Zeke, and he's getting pissed off because that's his guy and he likes his guys and he doesn't want to cut Zeke, but he knows financially it's the right decision to cut Zeke, but he's going to prove it and shove it down everybody's throat that he was right and Zeke was the guy by not signing another running back. He doesn't like free agency, but how can you not like free agency if you're an owner when you look at the running backs and guys are signing for $2 million and $1 million and they're signing tiny contracts? How would you not love that? How could you not have gone out? You signed Ronald Jones out of everybody, a guy who couldn't make it, a guy who was already basically out of the league. You signed him, was the guy you signed because Jerry couldn't make the decision. He drafted Deuce Vaughn for the footage, and it's going to end up costing his team, because they just don't have a run game, and teams are now being able to sort it out. Now, CeeDee Lamb had to have a 227-yard game. 227 yards he had to have for Dallas to be able to put up 20 points. You need to have some other support. Brandon Cooks is playing better. Brandon Cooks is there in key moments. Ferguson is getting better. There's more options, but there's one weapon right now. One weapon that you can use consistently on the Cowboys in CeeDee Lamb, and you need to have another one at the running back position. Or at least not negative. And I think if you have another running back to spell Tony Pollard some, especially on those plays where he's not going to be used, and you can put him on the bench a little bit more and put him back in and use him in different ways and try and get him used more in the role he was used last year, I think it make Tony Pollard and help him out some. But as long as he's your guy, you just have to forget the money you're paying at this point. Say $10 million, we got to find the right way to do this. I think you need look, I'd be giving a hard look to Dalvin Cook. I know he didn't look good, but I'd be trying to figure out the reason why. And part of the reason may be that this Jets offensive line is complete garbage. Maybe you think you have a better one. I know they went out and they're looking at La'el Collins. Reports were that they brought him to the practice squad, and then reports were that he said no deal was done yet. They brought in a linebacker as well, former linebacker, Damian Williams. They brought him in as well today to the practice squad, trying to bring in some of their old guys. Jerry Jones, I like our guys. But I think you need to go find a running back and go find Emmitt Smith. Go find somebody else. You have to find another running back for Dallas. I know I'm just hitting my head against a wall at this point, but every single game it points to the same problem when you look at it, is that there's no change of pace, and it's kind of all CeeDee Lamb, and then you hope Brandon Cooks gets a good break when you need to change it up, and they triple team CeeDee Lamb. And I don't know if that's going to continue to work. The 49ers are getting a bye week this week because the Rams are going to sit everybody. The Rams are basically, the 49ers are sitting a lot of guys. The Rams are sitting everybody too. So that's not going to be a game that you're going to want to tune into. But as for the Cowboys, look, Rico Dowdle's back in practice. That's a good sign. But if you've got another spot there's another spot. I know you may want to bring it in the O-line. Tyler Smith got hurt, but he's supposed to be back soon with the plantar fascia in the foot. He's supposed to be back. Just go out and I'd get somebody. That's just what I'm saying. Back on the text line. This texter says, if the Horns think they are back, they will never get there. You're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. To truly be back, to never be satisfied and always looking the next goal. Otherwise, complacency sets in. So I hope Sark and the gang never feel they are back. I agree with this somewhat. You do have to continue to grow. You have to celebrate the wins. I think there's some flaw in this you can never be content, because if you're never content, it means you're never happy, which if you're never happy, you will eventually spiral out of control and go downhill. So I think you do have to celebrate the wins. The best thing you can do is try and be better every day. If you're better every day, you've been better 365 times in a year, you're doing pretty good. So I think Texas can continue to try and get better. They can continue to try and step over. But if you say, well, you're either ripe, you're either growing, well, then what's Georgia doing? Because they can't grow. Are they done? I don't think they're done. I think they lost a game to Alabama. They got to figure it out. So I don't know if it's completely that, but I think you can celebrate your victories, and I can think you can say, all right, we are getting ourselves back to where we are, because you've got to recruit too. And you want to go in and recruit to a recruiting trip, and they go, hey, are you back? And you go, no, we suck. We got to be better. You got to be able to celebrate the victories. And I know I'm taking this too far and too on the line. I don't want to go too far, but I think you can't say that I hope that Texas never thinks they're back. I hope Texas does think they're back, because they are. And I'm not saying right now. I'm saying, hopefully in 5 years, and they're in the college football playoff every one of these years coming up, and they win a natty in there at least. And if you have that, then yeah, I hope they do think they're back, because they are. But if they're not, then you don't want them to be. But I get the sentiment of it, but I'm not 100% on board with it. But I get the sentiment, and I appreciate you texting it. Arborhorn81 says, Texas Longhorns will be back when they get a legitimate pass rush from 4 defensive linemen and then complement that pass rush with high-end scheme blitzes. I still see no legitimate pass rush in these 3 years with PK's defenses. Their blitz packages are not working. Secondary will be better when pressure is applied to the quarterback. There's been very little of that in the past 3 years. When Texas becomes feared by opponents, Texas will be back. Arborhorn81. All right, I do think they are working on that. They basically built the offense first. And they said, we're going to build the offense, because that's what Sark does, and we're going to build the offense first. And we played a clip of this in the first hour from Rod and Aaron talking about how they basically built this offense first. That we got to get the offensive and defensive line down. We got to get big humans first. And that's what they did. And they got quarterback, and they got wide receivers, and they got flash players. And then they started to say, okay, now we need to get linebackers. We need to get some linebackers. And they started to build linebacker depth. But they hadn't built fully up the edges. And they hadn't built up the secondary. This recruiting class right now, you're getting a lot more edges. You're getting a lot more DBs. This recruiting class, they're trying to build up in that back end in the defense. So they're trying to go. They get Trey Moore from UTSA. You get another guy. They're trying to build that. They're addressing that right now. And I get some people still don't like PK. PK kept a Washington offense that blew everybody, that was putting a ton of points out and held them to 37. And I know 37 doesn't seem like a small number, but it's a decent number of how well Michael Penix played. He could have put up more if this defense wasn't able to get some of those stops they were able to get. I don't necessarily, I understand you want to see more blitzing and you want to see more pressure. I think you just need to continue to build that D line up and keep recruiting better and better edges. And the more you build that D line, the D line will continue to grow. So I think I'm with you that if you want to say, well, we're not there because the recruiting classes haven't come in yet, we're going to turn that edge. I'm with you. If you just say they need to get rid of who they're got, I don't know who's good with that either. This texter says Gideon's still finding ways to keep Texas out of the national championship game. Come on, man. There's no call for that. No call for that whatsoever. This text says, what the heck is wrong with these coaches thinking we need to get rid of some of these coaches? We just went to the freaking playoffs. I agree that we are ahead of schedule. And I know Sark said that this was supposed to be in year 3. I think we're ahead of schedule, so I don't necessarily want to get rid of anybody and start rocking the boat. One of the Sark's things that he did really well was keep coaches and keep consistency and keep players happy, because there wasn't constant turmoil. And something that Texas had for a long time was every time a coach's name would slightly get on the hot seat, they would start getting rid of everybody. And it started with Mac when he started to get in trouble, and after that 2009 season and things started to go, and then it was, okay, well, this is not working. Let's get rid of this guy and this guy. And it's not a shot against any of these coaches. It's just what they do. It's what most people do. And Sark did the opposite. Sark said, I'm sticking with my guys. I trust them. I think we're going the right direction. And he was right. So he's stuck with those guys. So if he makes that decision, then I'll go, okay, I'll look more into it. But until that point, I'll be critical of a lot of things he does. I think it works to have some consistency in your coaching staff. So PK especially I have no problem with. I think he's a great guy, a defensive coordinator. I don't necessarily agree with all of his strategies. They're not flashy. They're not great, but it does work a lot of times. You do have to just improve the pass rush and secondary, but that's what you're doing in recruiting this season. That's what they've been looking at. That's what they've been going for, and they're continuing to build that. Tex says James Worthy missed the team bus to the Sugar Bowl. I did not hear that. No. Texas football, maybe. If you want to say if that meant to be Xavier Worthy, if that is, I think that's what you meant to say. Xavier Worthy, he was there. I just don't think I think he was hurt. I think he was hurt. If it was supposed to be Xavier Worthy, or if it was James Wiseman, if it was, I don't know who. But if it's X-Man, then yeah, I don't think he could cut. I think that ankle was still an issue, and he probably practiced on it and tried to get through it. That kid fights through a lot of pain and tries to stay out the field. How many times did he get knocked off and look like he was dying and then came back and played later in the game? The fact that he wasn't returning punts makes me believe that he just didn't have the ability to plant and cut the way he usually does, and that's why he wasn't on there. And Tex says, Texas football may be back, but Texas as a whole can't be back until the basketball team does something crazy. How they can't be good. I mean, they went to the Sweet 16 last year. And they looked similar to what they look like this year. What they do in the basketball team, and we'll go more into basketball as football season wraps up. We'll get more into basketball, which is what I've covered for a long time. But this Texas basketball team is not a bad team. They're going to take some time to grow. Dylan Dessou has just come back. Dylan Dessou getting worked into that lineup. Tyrese Hunter missed the last game, which really hurt their perimeter defense. Tyrese Hunter does play good perimeter defense. He's a little shorter, so some bigger guards can give him problems, but he does play good perimeter defense. Dylan Dessou coming back. He will continue to work in that lineup. But I think this is a team that, if you look at what Rodney Terry does, is what Chris Beard did as well. They really drill home the defense for the first part of the season, and it's about communication. It's about building up that defense, and you really work on that, and then the offense kind of becomes part of it. I think that's one of the reasons they wanted Max Abmas, is they felt that he would be kind of a stopgap until they get to where, the offense as a whole is working, and then he'd be even better in that. But I think they thought Max Abmas would be a little bit better of a creator than he's been so far this season, but that's just growing pains of him stepping into a higher level of play than he was at Oral Roberts, where he'll get better and better. But I think the offense and the shooting percentage, that was a problem last year, and this team did really well last year. This team succeeded last year, just losing out to a Miami team that was really good and very highly paid. And so I don't think that the Texas basketball is bad. But I will go with that. Texter says, why was a guy with a cast on his arm back to return a kickoff? I don't know. Couldn't tell you that. If I had to guess, this is because Sark is an extremely loyal guy, and he brought Keelan Robinson over with him from Alabama, and I'm sure he's told him they would give him opportunities, and I'm sure Keelan was on the sideline, and they talked about it, and they felt that either Jaden Blue was getting too beat up or too winded in the game after carrying the ball a lot. And so they wanted to try something else back there, and it just didn't work. I have to believe that he was catching them in pregame with the cast on, or if he was catching them somewhere else with the cast on. I can't believe that they put him out there without that. And maybe the kicker just kicked the ball slightly differently. I couldn't tell you. Text line's still open. We'll get back to the text in just a minute, 512-447-3776. Do want to hit a couple other things real quick. We didn't talk as well about the Texans versus the Titans. Good to see the Texans win their 26-3 victory over the Titans. Big piece of that, Devin Singletary, 5.5 yards a carry. 5 yards a carry. If Texas can continue to run the football and Nico Collins is still out there in the field and being healthy, it helps out Robert Woods moving to that number 2 position where he plays a lot better. When Robert Woods has to be the 1, he's a little bit easier to be covered up. So you get there. CJ Stroud had another a good enough game to get the win. They are playing the Colts this weekend. Nobody thought that the AFC South was going to come down to this, but it has, in part. I'll get into this more tomorrow. But in part, because Trevor Lawrence is a tough guy who maybe shouldn't be allowed to make his own decisions when he comes back. I think that he has progressively gotten worse throughout the season because he is so beat up, and maybe a couple weeks off a couple weeks ago would have solved a lot of these problems that are now happening. But that's revisionist. That's going back with 2020 vision. I would have said to pull him out when he had the concussion for more than 4 or 5 days anyway, but that's just me. But we'll get more into that tomorrow as we start to get into the playoff picture. The Cowboys right now just need to win, and they win the NFC South, which is huge for them after the Eagles have fallen down and really had a bad season or a bad end of season, let's say. But they have that on, I believe, the fifth or sixth tiebreaker, which is conference record. They have that. The Texans are, of course, tied with the Colts and the Jaguars. They're going to need to win the division. They need to beat the Colts and the Jaguars, lose to the Titans. So we actually have to root for the Titans this weekend. Probably not going to happen, but the Texans fighting for it. Could still get in the playoffs without winning the AFC South, but something to watch for there. We'll get more into that tomorrow. And then we can also mention that the Panthers' David Tepper has been fined $300,000. Wow, man, I know they wish that he got fired. He did not. He got fined $300,000, which for him is not a ton of money, sadly. But for throwing a drink out, Carolina needs to figure something out. They need to get a CEO in there, or else they're going to end up like the Commanders are, or like a lot of other teams that have the owners like that want to be too involved, but don't bring the right attitude. It's not going to end well. Not going to end well for them. They continue to let him be the face of this franchise, unwillingly be the face. I don't think it'll end well for them. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll play you some sound about Xavier Worthy from Hook 'em Up. I also want to get some more of your text messages. 512-447-3776 right here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 109 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on Sports Complex here on the Horn. It feels like a blues week, so I'm playing blues for you. Just been listening to some blues. The weather makes you feel like it. Man, all that rain yesterday. I slept through a lot of that rain. That was good sleeping rain. I know some of you were still finishing where I finished up here, and that was it was good weather to just lay down to and then pass out. Get some rest after a long weekend where there was things happening seemingly every night, and I felt like it was going to be done, but then I went to a show on Friday, and the Cowboys played on Saturday, and you hung out with some friends, and then Sunday is New Year's Eve, and you get a call from some friends, and then Monday you're watching the game, and then I wake up early on Tuesday to come do the morning show, and not a morning show guy. This is why I'm an afternoon show. That's why we do the afternoon show at the Sports Complex here for you. If any of the other people are not morning people, that's what I learned very quickly. Going in there and waking up in the morning and thinking, boy, I'd rather sleep than talk sports right now. That's kind of what my thought was at 4:30 in the morning when I was waking up. But we went in, had a good show. You can listen to that on the podcast page, recapping Washington and Texas for 5 hours on Tuesday morning. Back on the text line, 512-447-3776. Texter says, happy after holidays, Patrick. Still been keeping up with the Rockets. 2 tough games coming up after the Nets tonight. They do have the Nets tonight. Should be a good game. The Nets are playing their 3 out of 4 days. This is the back-to-back. This is the end of the 3 out of 4 days. Usually not a great sign for basketball teams. They've been playing pretty poorly, and the Rockets playing good at home. I haven't been watching a ton of Rockets. They're not necessarily the most fun team to watch. They play really good defense, which isn't necessarily the most fun thing to watch at all times when it's not your team. Dylan Brooks is on the team, which I'm not a huge fan of. So there's a lot I don't really like. There is some good stuff. They are a good team, not disparaging the team. They look a million times better than they did last year. They were unwatchable last year. And they didn't play defense then, but I've not watched a ton of Rockets. There still is the deep-seated Spurs rivalry with them, so it's harder for me to watch them and just impartially watch and not root against them, but they are good. I'll keep watching them as the season goes on. Now that football is wrapping up too, and the college football is wrapping up, it gives me some more time to watch basketball. I've been splitting it, and now it'll be more basketball time and more of my league pass and all of that, keeping up with everything. But yeah, I mean, they're tougher games. They're, I think they're doing pretty well. Şengün looks really good. That was a guy that I wanted the Spurs to look at. Probably would help them out with Wemby and have that center. Zach Collins is good too. But, look, we'll see how the Rockets keep continuing throughout this year. If they can continue to grow, I think Email was the right hire there as well. Texter says, Arbor181 says, I like PK, and I know they're moving the defense in the right direction. I pray these edge rushers that are coming in will make a big difference in the pass rush. The pass rush and the secondary performing well go hand in hand. One becomes better because the other is becoming better. I don't think teams fear our defense yet. They feared our run defense this year, but not our overall defense. I think we're back as far as competing till I make college football playoffs. I think we'll complete the national championship game once we have a defense that can be dominant. A little worried about replacing our defensive tackles and some of our run-stopping linebackers for next year. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. It's nice to see Alfred Collins coming back, and you're hoping to get some guys to take that step forward during the offseason. I agree with you. I don't think people fear our defense. I think they feared their offense. And one of the teams in the national championship right now, no one fears their defense. We didn't fear it, and they scored 31. We only scored 31 points on them, but we didn't fear them. Braylon Trice you fear. That was the only defender you actually feared from Washington, and they're in the national championship game. So I think that you don't necessarily have to have the fearful defense. You'd like to get the pass rushing up. I agree 100%. You want to see that grow, and that's why you really want to get Trey Moore to have that immediate impact. Colin Simmons, again, if Colin Simmons turns out to be half the player they think he is, he's going to make a big impact on defense. Eventually, if he's what they say he is right now, he could be playing snaps next year and making a difference. So I get the defensive tackles as well. It's going to be an issue. You're going to have to replace it, but you're going to hope for the best and continue to recruit big humans. And again, the transfer portal I don't believe is closed. I think it's still open. So I think you never know. It's got to be the right fit. They keep saying that. Dexter says, Horn should be playing Monday. As bad as third quarter was, it was a miracle after their player got hurt and stopped the clock. Then take that ball in the 14. You take your shots to the end zone with 15 seconds left. I get it. I get it's frustrating. The game was over before then, by the way. Like everyone I've talked to who covered this game for the past month would have said that basically after the Jaden Blue fumble, after the third quarter, you were pretty much saying, all right, they went up 10. It's going to be really hard to come back from 2 scores. The fumble and everything that happens in it, Kalen DeBoer mismanaged that fourth quarter. Like he just mismanaged that fourth quarter completely. He wasn't expecting Texas to have the fight to come back in that game. They did. But I honestly think the better team won. The way Michael Penix Jr. played, I think the better team won. We had a shot. We had every shot in the world. If he throws that pass differently and he throws that outside shoulder pass, we win, and we're playing on Monday. But I'm not going to hang into that because it was lucky we got there anyway. I do want to play the sound. We're going to get back to the text line in just a second, 512-447-3776. But the news was today that Xavier Worthy, or news last night, Xavier Worthy is heading to the NFL draft. And Rob Babers broke down this morning what that could mean for Xavier Worthy in his comparisons in the NFL.
All right, let's talk about Xavier Worthy really quickly. Then we'll get to Texas passing game versus Washington. Kind of what went wrong and what Texas could have done a little bit better to be more effective in the passing game versus Washington. Probably won the ball more. Probably would have helped the passing game be more effective. But I digress. Getting back to it, Xavier Worthy did announce that he is heading to the NFL. I think he's number 3 all time. If you look at the hierarchy of the greatest Texas receivers in Texas football history. Here's his case. He's 5th all time in receiving yards in a career. He has 2 spots in the top 10 in single season touchdown campaigns. He's 2nd and 9th on that list. He is 3rd all time in touchdowns in receiving touchdowns in a career, 6th in receptions in a career, 7th ranked in a single season reception campaign. So he's got the 7th best season there. So and last year actually was a down year for him. So actually really only had 2 good years. Last year was a bit of a down year for him. Probably could have been much higher in some of these statistical categories. And of course, if he had stayed longer, he'd have probably been number 1 in all these categories potentially. And I think the added value of him being a great punt returner, an elite punt returner, also helps you in terms of the him being a fan favorite. Longhorn fans remember something exciting happening a lot when Xavier Worthy touched the ball, whether it be the deep balls that he caught or whether it be the punt returns. He caught a lot of touchdowns, which I like for my wide receivers. So I would say he's definitely top 5. My argument would be 3rd best receiver all time behind Jordan Shipley, who I think is the GOAT, and Roy Williams. If you want to put Roy Williams ahead of Jordan Shipley, you could do that. But like I said, my argument against Roy Williams, who I played with, by the way, my former teammate, so I love the guy, was that he never caught a touchdown in the Texas OU game. Can't call you the GOAT of wide receivers if you never caught a touchdown in the Texas OU game. So I'll give that to Jordan Shipley. I think Roy is 2nd. But I think Xavier Worthy's, he's right there in that category. In terms of, I had somebody ask me, out of all those great wide receivers, which one would have been the toughest to cover? For me, I'm going to say Jordan Shipley would probably be.
I was going to ask you that same question right there.
Yeah, I think Jordan Shipley. Honestly, and this is why. It's about Jordan Shipley. I mean, his route running was just superb. He was an elite route runner, elite, and his deceleration, acceleration was excellent out of his breaks. And he was a physical wide receiver. Oftentimes, playing bump and run coverage, I could press a receiver and I could throw them off of their route, redirect them. I don't know if I'd be able to do that. Jordan Shipley was a lot stronger than people gave him credit for. Like strong route runner.
Just a great athlete too. I mean, coming out of Burnett, and,
great
3
hands.
sports.
Oh man,
really good athlete.
But what I could not.
Son of a coach, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And I love me some Bob Shipley, by the way. I think I got some Shipley merch coming actually.
Nice.
For Bob Shipley, who I do work with on Texas Football. He's fantastic. Do football theory with him. Go check that out. It's our YouTube channel. But anyway, I think this is why it would have been tougher to defend Jordan Shipley out of all the top wide receivers, the X-Man or Roy Williams. It's the chemistry with Colt that I could not defend.
That's true.
That's the chemistry and the accuracy. I think about that when I'm defending wide receivers. I'm like, well, who's throwing the football? Listen, I love Quinn. Quinn's great. I would have been. I think I'd have been able to defend X-Man because X-Man is mostly speed, and I just got to be able to reroute X-Man. And one of the things X-Man doesn't do really well is play through contact a lot of the times. That's why even the Jabbar Muhammad, he's a physical player for Washington at the corner. I think I'd have won my fair share against him. I won my fair share against Roy, so I know how to cover Roy Williams. And like I said, Chris Sims throwing him the football, that's legit. But I know how Chris throws football. Chris wants to throw the football through you. Not a lot of touch.
Throws it hard.
Yeah. So I know angles to the football wise, he ain't going to put a touch right over my head. He's going to try to put it through me, through that window, that really tight window. So I think I'll be better defending that as well. What I can defend is Colt McCoy's touch and accuracy and the chemistry and the bromance with him and Jordan Shipley. Dude, they're running option routes out there. They go just run to you know what I mean?
I don't know if I remember that it was beat to death. They were friends, right? Jordan and Colt.
You know what I mean? Like You can't defend that as a DB. That's the hardest thing to defend is chemistry. So I think that's why it would have been the toughest.
I think that dovetails back to the Washington game with Michael Penix. He's got that chemistry, and he's that good of a thrower.
Great point. With all three of them guys.
All three of those guys.
That's a great point. So, yeah, for that's in terms of, I had somebody ask me the question. I'll throw that out there.
That's good. I was going to ask you that anyhow.
Yeah, but I'll say this about X-Man, too. One thing I admire about X-Man, though, he is small-ish, and you're going to hear this during scouting season. They're going to be knocking him because they're going to be like, he's small. But he's physical for a small little dude.
He is.
Right? He's
dog
not
to him.
Yes, he's not afraid of contact and not afraid of the physical play. I don't think Sark will recruit Sark likes speed demons. He likes slight-ish, small-ish receivers who can run. He's got another one coming in this class who's kind of remember that last receiver they committed? He's kind of an X-Man starter kit. Like Xavier Worthy starter kit, the one out of California. I forget his name.
Aaron Butler.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of that in him. Sark likes speed. He's bringing in Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden's got some of that small-ish speed demon, but he's a little bit more stout. I will say this about Sark and his affection for these types of receivers, and he likes them and he knows how to utilize them. Most coaches in the NFL, they actually steer clear of these types of small-ish, fast receivers. Because they don't think they can play through contact. Think the NFL is too physical for them. Once they get to a press man league like the NFL, that's physical, that small receivers like Xavier, they'll end up getting hurt or they won't be able to get open downfield. And for years, actually, NFL's coaches believed this, and this was part of their data evaluation. And receivers like Xavier Worthy, they would drop in the draft. I'll give Sark credit, and Sark didn't do it intentionally, but Sark has actually changed wide receiver evaluation at the NFL level. And I got proof of it. So they have what they call body mass index. For those who don't know, and I'm not saying I swear by body mass index. I can give a damn about it. It's just a reference. It's a quantitative way to measure, body fat and height and weight, and it's basically a measurement of the combination of those things, right? And they call it body mass index. So if you look at a body mass index, so we're basically trying to see how slight a guy like Xavier Worthy is. He's 6'1", 172. His body mass index is around 22.7. If you look at wide receivers with below average body mass index, and the average for these wide receivers, let's put it at 25. So we're looking at wide receivers with below a 25 body mass index. To give you a little bit of perspective on that, Zay Flowers was drafted right in the first round. He's at 26, and he's a smaller receiver. But he's stout. He's
quick
thick.
As heck.
He's thick, though, right? He's thick. He's at 26 body mass index. X-Man's at 22.7. Devontae Smith's at 23.
Yeah, that's the comp I get with him.
These are smallish guys, right? They're smallish guys.
Remember, Devontae Smith came back for his senior year and won the Heisman.
Jordan Addison, you've seen him. He's slight-ish, right? Jordan Addison, his body mass is at 24.1. These are slight-ish guys, small-ish guys.
Hollywood Brown kind of comes to mind.
Yes, that's exactly right. These types of guys. The NFL would shy away from those receivers because they didn't think they were physical enough and they didn't think they were big enough. And I'll give you a stat. So there were 24 wide receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds, all right, with a 25 BMI or less since 2000. All right, so since 2000, 24 wide receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds with a 25 BMI or less. Since 2000. How about this? There have been 9 of them drafted since Devontae Smith was taken in the top 10.
Change the narrative.
Sark did.
Won the game.
Sark, and he won the Heisman, right? He won the Heisman, drafted in the top 10.
Well,
Probably the highest draft pick of those receivers who are small-ish and slight-ish. And what Sark did was provide a blueprint on how to use them. And now we have NFL offenses who are trickling up to the NFL. There's no such thing as a pro-style offense anymore in a college offense. They're essentially running the same schemes and concepts. And now you can take Sark's blueprint for a small-ish, slight receiver and go, hey, we can do that. And who does that more than the Philadelphia Eagles? They essentially run what a lot of people would describe as college concepts, RPOs, a lot of targets to motion, obviously the quarterback run game being a bigger part of that. So I think Sark not only – unintentionally, I think he shifted the narrative about these types of receivers because he provided a blueprint how to use them.
Well, and let's also say in this day and age, you can't headhunt receivers, right? You can't take them out.
Yep.
So they can last longer, I think would be the way to put it. They're more durable. And look, I would say this for X-Man. You know, Devontae Smith came back for his senior year at Alabama and ended up winning the Heisman Trophy. I do think if X-Man were coming back for a senior year, he'd be that kind of player. I don't know if he'd win the Heisman, but he's going to be Quinn Ewers' favorite target. He's going to be a guy who's going to rack up big numbers. He's going to return some punts. So he'd be in that conversation. So I do think the comp for me is somewhere in the NFL, Rob, between Devontae Smith and Marquise Hollywood Brown. Remember the kid out of Oklahoma?
Yeah, it's not bad.
That's where I see him. Now, will he reach the level of Devontae Smith, or is he going to be closer to Hollywood Brown, who's really just a deep threat that never has developed into a full-time, all-around receiver in the NFL? Devontae Smith has. Now, he's got A.J. Brown to help him, too, there.
I think that's why
they complement each other well.
I think a lot of your success in the NFL is built on the system. It's based on the system.
Yeah, who's throwing you the ball?
Hollywood Brown ended up with who? Well, he ended up with the
Lamar
Ravens.
Jackson.
The Ravens, who, by the way, it ain't Lamar Jackson can throw the football. We see that now. But the Ravens didn't want to spread the ball out. Yeah. They didn't want wide receivers. They wanted tight ends and fullbacks.
It was the Ravens without this offense.
Yes, if he was in this offense, he'd actually be doing pretty good. They were running an antiquated offense, but they wanted to maximize Lamar Jackson. He won the MVP running that offense, so I'm not knocking it, but it wasn't good for necessarily a wide receiver in that offense. And then he went to Arizona, and the culture in Arizona was just toxic. So I don't know if anything grows. And
I'd say this for if you get a career like Hollywood Brown, he's a good player.
No, he's a good player, but my point is, it just like your comp for Xavier Worthy, I think it's about the system they go in. What system did Devontae Smith in? He ended up in a decent system, right? He had it was a good offensive coach that even after Doug Peterson, you had Shane Steichen coming in there with Sirianni, and they ran a really I would say it's a wide receiver friendly system. It's compatible wide receiver.
Well, especially after the trade with A.J. Brown, and you brought a complimentary player, and their run game is so good,
and they know how to use him.
Well, I think for X-Man, this deep receiver class could help him because he's going to get drafted probably lower in the first round and go to a team that's got good players.
Or pushed into the second round and a team can trade up for him.
Yeah,
like Kansas City or somebody like that needs him. I agree with that. It was one little stat just to continue, just to put a bow on it. 24 wide receivers drafted in the first two rounds with 25 body mass index or less. I just pointed out Devontae Smith's at 23, X-Man's at 22.7. So this is since 2000, and 10 of them. All right, 10 of those receivers have come in the last 3 years. That's since Devontae Smith basically was taken really high in the draft. So almost half of the wide receivers in the last 23 years who have been drafted in the first two rounds with a 25 or less BMI have happened in the last 3 years. That is, I think, start kind of shifting the narrative a little bit with those guys. 8 of those, you're talking about 8 in the previous 16 years. All right, you started talking about that. Well, sorry, 14 now in the previous 16 years, but 10 of those in the last 3 years. I think that's a big part of that is Sark. Now, the key is going back to only 2,000-yard seasons out of all those receivers. So they don't get a lot. And
that's the thing. I don't know the
productivity.
Look, and this is why I think the what Sark had vision for X-Man and A.D. Mitchell. Right, A.D. Mitchell became kind of the go-to guy in the red zone. X-Man was the explosion player, right? He was going to create big plays and punt returns, much like we see Devontae Smith. But when you need a first down or you need something big, you're probably going to A.D. Mitchell.
Yep.
I still think the NFL favors the bigger-bodied guys, but you like those guys as the complement, the guys that take the top off of defense, the Brandon Cooks kind of guys. That's
exactly right.
You're going to use them. They're going to make a defense worry about them, but you're probably going to have a CeeDee Lamb too. Now, you're probably going to have a, what do you call Brandon Ayuk? Brandon Ayuk's a bigger guy in San Francisco, but he's the man beater.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the man beater. So
exactly
you're going to double up on Debo. You got to watch on Kittle. What do you do with McCaffrey? And then it's Brandon Ayuk getting single covered all the time. That could be X-Man if you put him in the right offense.
Totally agree.
And he's going to beat man coverage quite a bit.
Yeah, so those guys, like I said, there may be something to it, some substance that they don't produce at the NFL level you want to, but I think ultimately that's because NFL coaches are behind the times a little bit. Some of these newer coaches who are using these receivers in the right way, using that Sark blueprint to weaponize them, I think you'll start to see more of those guys like Devontae Smith. Hell, now like a Zay Flowers potentially in the right system. Hell, I think even Tank Dell was a third-round wide receiver, but he's in that category too.
That's a good one.
Tank Dell, he was a third round, but he's right there.
He's a great player.
And he got hurt though.
And elite quickness. Elite quickness was, I think, what X-Man will have when he gets to the combine.
Yep.
Some good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. Weekday morning 6 to 11 right here on the Horn. Text line still open, 512-447-3776. Texter still texting in about the game. Texter says, hot take, Texas should have ran at the end of the game, and at a minimum they should have had a 2 running back formation more in the second half. At the very end, they couldn't run the ball as much because of the no timeouts. It just became much harder to run the ball. In that last 45 seconds, they had 1 timeout. So it just became more difficult to run the ball. But they should have run more too. They should have run the ball more. But we all know that. And run more too, running back. Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back and look at what Washington gave you, it just never seemed to. It felt like Sark was playing a waiting game for Washington to adjust for them running, and then he was going to be able to do what he wanted to do, and they just never adjusted because they weren't doing it enough. And so if they could have run the ball, they could have gotten the adjustments they wanted. But I agree with you. I agree with you there. WPI Parts Guy says top 4 wide receivers from Texas: Shipley 1, Cosby 2, Roy Williams 3, and Xavier Worthy at 4. Not a bad list. I probably have Roy Williams over Quan Cosby, and I know Quan's an awesome guy, but I probably have Roy Williams over him. And Xavier Worthy's right in that conversation. He's right in that conversation. He just, I don't know, the 2 years of not the success probably hurt where his rankings are, but he was so good in those 2 years. And this year, I think, if he didn't have the injuries at the end of the season, could have been even more electric. And what he meant returning the ball as well. But those four seem like a pretty good top 4, whatever order you're going to put them in. Chan says, Bo Davis is being courted by LSU. Any idea if he is staying staying or otherwise? Look, as far as I know, he's making $1 million a year at Texas, so I would assume he's staying. I would assume they might even give him some more. I mean, I just don't know if LSU is going to be able to give him that amount of money, or if they're going to give him a bigger role and what the negotiations are. I'm sure they want him. I'd want him too if I was another school and you see what he's done. But it may just be. I don't know I don't think he has any ties to Brian Kelly either, so I don't know where it would come as a recruiting tool. But it may just be at the end of the day, Texas may have to pony up some more money. Maybe you have to pony up a better title, whatever it is. But I know what he was able to do here. So I think there's a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys are probably having conversations. Their agents are at least having conversations. And those reports may leak out if they want to go back to Texas and get a raise. That's business. It's the way it's done. And Texter says, stricter PI calls help with smaller wide receivers don't need to be as strong. That does help. The game being basically being made to be, they want the big plays. And so if you're a big player, they're going to try and help you out more you can. You still are going to have people get bumped in the line of scrimmage, but there's ways you can fight around things. And I think Xavier Worthy's shown a lot of that. And in the right system, he could be the guy. The question is, can he get to the right system and the right quarterback and all of that? But I do think he can be successful in the NFL. I don't know if he's ever, I don't think he turns into Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. I think that may be a little too high. But a successful wide receiver in the NFL, sure. Yes. I think he could be a guy, probably not his rookie season, but maybe down the line ends up on your fantasy football team as well, getting some big plays over the top. We're going to take our last break. When we come back, if any more texts come in, 512-447-3776, we'll get to those, and we'll wrap the show up here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, hornfm.com. All right, wrapping up here on a Wednesday. We'll come back tomorrow, get into start to get into the national championship game a little bit more, but that's not till Monday, so we may not get to add too much. We'll talk. Maybe if there's more Texas news, we'll get into that. Of course, more of your text messages. We'll keep the show rolling. A lot more NFL talk tomorrow, some NBA talk, college basketball. By the way, women's basketball starting at 6:00, taking on Texas Tech. Rory Harmon is injured for the season, tore an ACL. So big news. Women's basketball going to be trying to hang in there and deal with Rory Harmon's injury, but hopefully they will get a win over Texas Tech tonight. Until then, until tomorrow when we get back to you, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. More of the Sports Complex, 4 p.m. right here on The Horn.